Baqiya graveyard, where many of the Prophet's relatives and companions are buried. Radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in wa sallallahu ala Habib Muhammad bin Salim. They move with a sense of purpose and unity like a single body, which distinguished them from the rest of the visitors there. This was the new generation of the Habaib, or the beloved ones. And I had met Habib Ahmad Mashhur al-Haddad and Habib Abdul Qadir al-Saqqaf, two great mountains. In the autumn of their lives, I've met them, meaning at the end of their lives. Now, the energy of this young group was something different. They were like a gentle cyclone. 5 years later, in 1998, visiting South Yemen to attend the commemoration of the Prophet Hud, alayhi salam, I took permission to photograph Habib Umar and Tarim, and I was a little nervous as I set up the camera and tripod for the photo. I didn't know him very well, but had heard that he had been singled out for particular attention by various spiritual guides and scholars from childhood, as if being groomed for a weighty destiny. And I'm going to ask you to tell the story about his childhood, which is almost like Hollywood, really, if you think about it. Like it's like mythical. To be honest, it's like mythical. As I watched him through the lens, I could see how vital his spiritual energy was as he sat quietly invoking the name of Allah. He was extremely courteous and composed, but there was an air of wildness about him, an intoxicating light that drew people to him like moths to a flame and burned away the darkness in one's soul. Now, years later, his followers are in the tens of thousands. His college in Tarim, Dar al-Mustafa, is attended by students from around the world. When he visits the Far East, he attracts vast audiences. In 10 years, he had changed greatly, transforming from an impassioned saint to a seasoned sage. He travels extensively, taking little food and sleep. Whenever he speaks about the Prophet ﷺ and his family, it is as if he knows them personally. And you always hear a new, intimate story about them. His face is often slightly upturned, as if drawing energy from a vast unseen. And that's where we'll stop. The Far East, when he goes to Indonesia, they have, it seems to be like soccer stadiums. Yeah. And some of these events, when you look at them, you don't see the end. Like, I don't know if they're spilling into the streets. You just see people upon people upon people. Like, must be easily over 50,000. Like Madison Square Garden, as a visual, it's 17,000 people, right? So if I'm looking at it, and it's like double that, easily double that.
It could even get up to be more.
It could get up to
with certain majalis, especially. If you could look back at the previous visit that he just did to, I think it was Indonesia or Malaysia, the last visit he did. Malaysia, huh? I've never seen anything like that.
Stadiums, I'm telling you. Football stadiums, 80 to 90,000 people. When you get a minute, pull up one of those pictures of those stadiums. And there was one of the students. Let's put us lower and Habib higher. You all know that Omar is making the thingy. You could put Awliya of Yemen at the bottom and lower our pictures a bit. He makes a thumbnail while I'm streaming. I'm sitting here watching. Right? Okay. The story about Habib Umar's youth. His childhood. This, like a mythical moment.
They say
in retrospect.
They say about Habib that, like, his father used to see him gather up pillows after his durus or go to the animals that they had. And Habib would practice delivering the dars while he was still a child. And his dad, like, when he saw that, radiallahu anhu, he saw that was like, he saw that there was something in his son, Allah yahfadhu. And specifically, the famous story that they tell about the father, Shaheed Muhammad bin Salim bin Hafiz, who was kind of like the Imam of Tarim in his time, right? And it was during the time when the communists had control over Yemen. And you hear some of the kind of like raw displays of Iman in the face of kufr, in kind of when they relate the stories of how the Habaib kind of stood up to these communists. But basically any type of display of religion, you're wiped. and they were constantly attacking the communists because they were saying, like, Habibi, you can't just take people's wealth and reapportion it. This is dhulm.
Yeah.
So the ulama were really they were really up in arms against the communists when they came and took over Yemen. And of course they were like atheists, and they used to have like Habib always, he talks about this, he mentions this, Allah yahfadhu, he talks about how they used to have a sign that would say La sawt ya'la ala sawt al-hizb. And they had this big sign. It said, "No voice will be louder than the voice of the Communist Party," basically, right? And then years later, after the communists had been kicked out of Yemen and everything was all said and done, Habib hosted his Jalsat al-Ithnain, the dars where he talks tafsir, where he gives exegesis of the Quran. He hosted that class in that saha where that same sign was, in that same square. And then he said they used to say that there would be no voice louder than the voice of the Communist Party, and now you hear the voice of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his Lord Jalla Jalaluh blasting through these alleyways, right? So the what happened was Habib Muhammad bin Salim rahimahullah, basically what happens is they used to have them come and check in with the communists in a place, like they had this little like building next to Jami' Tarim, right? And Jami' Tarim was the place where most people pray Jum'ah in Tarim, right? And it was the oldest Jum'ah in Tarim for a while before they ended up establishing another one. There's fiqh behind that, right? In the Shafi'i school, you can't have more than one Jum'ah simultaneously.
Same with us.
Naam. So what happens is that was under construction, so they were praying in Masjid Mihdar, which is far away from where the check-in was happening, right? So Habib Muhammad on Jum'ah, every single Jum'ah, they had to go and check in. So he leaves Habib Umar with his shawl in Masjid Mihdar. And Habib Umar at this point is 9 years old. He's 9 years old. He's a young boy. He leaves him with his shawl and he goes to check in, and he's never seen again after that moment, right? He's never seen again after that moment. And as Habib would grow older, his brother Habib Mashhur, Allah yarhamu, who passed away recently, Habib Ali Mashhur, he saw that like Habib was kind of, yani nash'atu was like promising. There was a lot of promise in the way that Habib was growing up, and so he had him move from Hadhramaut in order to continue his education, where he went and he studied with Habib Muhammad Haddar, who would become his father-in-law later in life, in the city of Bayda, which is in the north of Yemen, right? But the shahid here is that Habib Muhammad, like when he was kidnapped, you know, they saw this as a huge blow, right? Because Habib Muhammad was yani the Imam of Hadhramaut at that time, right? And the Imam of Tarim. But he, you know, even they, like some of the poets, when they write some of the poetry about this moment, they mentioned that there was a secret in the fact that he left his shawl with Habib Umar. Right? There was kind of a handoff that was happening there. And the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have insight into these things. يَنظُرُونَ بِنُورِ اللَّهِ, right? So he left it and he went istushhid. Yani Allah yarhamu. And there's many stories about the Habaib standing in the face of this kufr. Like they mention a story of one of the Habaib that he, despite them, you know, threatening them and telling them you can't come out dressed up like in the typical gear that they'll wear, right? He was walking through the streets and wearing the jubba and the imama and the rida and all of these different articles of clothing that are linked with the Prophet ﷺ by his sunnah, right? And when they saw him, they said, "Ya Habib, why are you doing this? You're going to get yourself in trouble." And he said, so that people don't forget this prophetic guise, right? So what did they do? They took him, they tied him up to the back of a car, and they started dragging him through the streets. And the whole time he's yelling, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, until he passes out. So yani you have these mawaqif that these ulama, they stood in the face of this kufr. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them on behalf, right? There used to be in the city of Tarim, the Ribat of Tarim, which was one of the oldest schools in Tarim, and Dar al-Mustafa, which didn't exist yet. All of these different institutions of learning were closed because of the communists. You know, Sheikh Umar Hussein al-Khatib, he says that we used to hide our books of Nahu.
Subhanallah.
They used to hide their books of grammar, and they used to go by night and sneak into the homes of the shuyukh in order to read books of grammar with them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he saw this kind of desire to enliven the religion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in their knowledge. And now look at it, spreading all over the world.
I mean, we think that we have issues here. They had massive calamities where they felt too. These communists are not just, they have policies that are unlawful. They're atheists. direct and open atheists, right? Explicit atheism. That's what communism brings with. The more you go up in their ranks, it's not like here you become a Western liberal and you can say the name Islam. Oh, I'm a Muslim. I believe in a higher power. Blah blah blah. You have that here in the West, where you could have that as long as you have all the other poisons. You could say that, right? But there, it's an explicit atheism that you have to embrace. And Marx was a materialist. Before he was an economist, he was a materialist, right? He was a philosopher, I mean, and materialism was his philosophy. So they're not only facing this. In Dar al-Islam, they were also attacked severely because of their Ash'ari Aqidah and their Ghazalian Tasawwuf. They were attacked severely to the point that it was like almost in hiding in both ways, right? The amounts of fitan and a destruction of a legacy, or at least a perceived an attack on their legacy, and an attack on this that really I don't think we can really imagine and appreciate. You know, the fight that they had to go through, and the fact that now it's a place where people go for ilm would have probably been an unheard of concept in 30 years ago.
No,
right? This has probably been unheard of. And the school opens up, what, 1995? Dar Mustafa opened up in 1995, and Habib Umar was he was the spearhead of all this dawah, and that's why a lot of people go there. So
you opened the school on the day that his father was taken.
Oh,
that's
subhanAllah.
also-
So
yeah,
that's
that's
the
another
anniversary of the school is the anniversary that his father was.
no,
Was his body recovered, or
they never recovered it.
subhanAllah? So there was no, like, there was janazat al-ghaib, was it even? Because there's a waiting period. If
There
when
is a
someone's
waiting
ghaib.
period. I'm not sure what they did exactly, but yeah, I mean they never recovered his body.